Hi guys, welcome. And who dat? I'm Joe, and today we are going to look at a brief history of the New Orleans Saints drafting players in the top 10. So, it's a big point of emphasis right now. The Saints aren't very good. They are currently 3-7, and before this past weekend, the Saints had had a 7 game losing streak, and we were almost guaranteed a top 5 pick in the upcoming draft. Well, we beat Atlanta this past weekend, and I saw more than one Saints fan get upset about this. I guess because everything seems hopeless at this point, and it seems like we need a reset, a reboot, that the best way to go about this would be to have a top 5, top 10 pick. But we're only halfway through the season. I mean, we still got 7 games left to go. So, uh, 7 games left to go, and a lot can change. If the team wins a bunch of games here in the second half of the season, ultimately we feel like the team will still end up 500, not relevant, not playoff contenders. And so most fans acknowledge this that instead of getting a top 10 pick in the draft, you're going to end up with another pick in the late teens or 20s or something like that, maybe early teens, but not in the top 5, not in the top 10. And since all is lost, we should just lose everything and set our sights on that number 1 overall pick. Well, regardless of how you feel as a Saints fan about this or how I feel as a Saints fan about this, I thought it was an interesting thing to look into to see exactly how many times we picked in the top 10, how good those players ended up being. And then I started thinking about the best players in Saints history and where those players were taken. And that's what this video is about. It's to present some of the facts of the matter, and then from there we can gleam and dream further about you know what we're going to do. uh, you can have your opinion about all of this, so whether any of it was good, bad. I'm not trying to be biased from my point of view, and I'll let you know how I feel about the whole thing at the end of the video. But this was my homework. So I wanted to start in the 80s. I wanted to start with 1981. I didn't want to go through the entire year. The Saints, every year of the Saints' existence, the Saints had a lot of top 10 picks in the 70s. But the truth of the matter is, we were never winners. The only time we ever came close was the very late 70s, and that was after hitting on some high draft picks. Wes Chandler was a fifth overall pick, I think, in the late 70s. And right around that time, and with early picks, we ended up getting Chuck Muncie and Henry Childs and Tony Galbraith. But most famously in the 70s, we drafted quarterback Archie Manning in 1971, and he was a second overall pick in the first round. So this was the only quarterback, Archie Manning, the only quarterback the Saints have ever drafted in the first round in their existence. It's the only time it ever happened. And he turned out to be a great player, but he averaged about 3 wins a year because the whole team around him wasn't very good. And like I said, in the late 70s, we acquired some pieces on offense and turned into a pretty decent offense. I don't think were we ever 8-8? Hold on a sec. Right. So under Dick Nolan in the late 70s, in 78, we were 7-9. And in 1979, we were 8-8. And this was as close as the Saints had ever gotten to being a winner. 1980, it all came crashing down. We were 1-15, including firing the coach mid-season or during the season. Then we got Bum Phillips, and in 1980 we were 4-12, but then in 81 we were 4-12. In 82, a strike shortened season, we were 4-5. And then in 83, we were 8-8, and it seemed like we were, knocking on heaven's door again. I think we finished 84, 7-9, 85. We were 4-8, and Bum Phillips, you know, resigned. And then his son took over, and we only won one game more after that. So, yeah, we weren't very relevant until the very late 70s, and then 1980, that went away. And then I'm starting with 1981, and we're going to look at how many top 5 and top 10 draft picks the Saints actually had during this emerging time of relevance and throughout the last 43 years. So I'm going to pull up 9 positions right here. Okay. In the last 43 years, since 1981, the Saints have had 9 picks in the top 10, just 9. And only 3 of those were in the top 5. So over the last 43 years, the Saints haven't really had a chance to pick in the top 10, but we've had 9 opportunities. And these positions I'm showing you are the positions that we drafted with those 9 players. So you're talking about 3 running backs, 2 defensive tackles, 2 offensive tackles, 2 offensive guards. So it's kind of wild that we've only had 9 picks in the top 10, but even wilder that it was only 4 positions addressed. So if you want to try to guess since 1981 who have been those top 10 picks, there's the positions. You can pause the video and try to figure it out. And yeah, I'm going to let you know right now. So the 3 running backs that were taken in the top 10. There you go. George Rogers, 1981. He was the first overall pick. He ended up being Rookie of the Year that year. So George Rogers, and then we ended up, he wasn't on the team, but for a couple of years he ended up in Washington. So I don't remember if I think we traded him, but there's your first top 10 pick since 1981, George Rogers, first overall. The next player I'm going to mention is running back Ricky Williams, who was the 5th overall pick in 1999. And you guys remember how we acquired that. Ditka traded all of our picks in that draft just to move up a couple of spots and get Ricky Williams. And the 3rd running back drafted in the top 10 by the Saints was Reggie Bush, 2006. He was the 2nd overall pick. And those picks, George Rogers, 1st overall pick, Ricky Williams, 5th overall pick, Reggie Bush, 2nd overall pick, are the only 3 players since 1981 that the Saints have drafted in the top 5. And all 3 of them were running backs. My, how times have changed. The next position that we focused a lot on was defensive tackle. And yeah, 2 of them, both of them in the Mickey Loomis era. Oh, you guys remember Jonathan Sullivan, the 6th overall pick in 2003. Yeah, that didn't work out very well. And then in 2008, with the 7th overall pick, we drafted defensive tackle Cedric Ellis. Yeah, so not a lot of success there at that position in the top 10. The next position I want to focus on, offensive tackle. We drafted 2 players in the top 10 since 1981. at offensive tackle. One of them was Willie Roaf with the 8th overall pick in 1993, and Willie Roaf ends up being a Hall of Famer. By the way, the only Hall of Famer on this list. Willie Roaf was the man, right? So, but he wasn't a top 5 pick, but he was a top 10 pick. And the other offensive tackle we got with a top 10 pick was good old Mike Ditka in 1998, drafting Kyle Turley with the 7th overall pick. Kyle Turley was a higher draft pick than Willie Roaf. Kyle Turley was an okay player. And then the last two picks we made since 1981 in the top 10 were guards. In 1986, we drafted Jim Dombrowski with the 6th overall pick, and that was a great pick. And then, of course, Mike Ditka, 9 picks in the top 10 over the last 43 years, and Mike Ditka had his hands on 3 of them. Guard Chris Naoli, 1997. He was taken 10th overall. And yeah, that worked out about as good as Cesar Ruiz is working out for us now. Actually, Ruiz is probably a better player than Naoli. So, do the Saints need a top 10 pick in order to turn this franchise around? Well, if you have a quarterback in mind, then yeah, you probably need a top 5 pick to get that guy. Or maybe you're just all in love with Travis Hunter, and maybe that's the guy you're wanting to go and get. But the Saints have had lots of success with other draft picks besides the 9 top 10 picks that were taken in the last 43 years. So that got me thinking, well, who are the greatest players in Saints history and where were they drafted? Because when you look at this list of top 10 picks in the last 43 years for the Saints, you've only got one guy that's a Hall of Famer. That's Willie Roaf. Now, a bunch of them were good. George Rogers was good. Dombrowski was good. Roaf was great. Ricky Williams was good. Reggie Bush was good. Okay, so you got some good players, but none of them considered the greatest in Saints history except for Willie Roaf. So I'm going to pull up a list of the greatest players at each position, in my opinion, for the Saints, and we'll look at where they were drafted. So, of course, the greatest player in Saints history is Drew Brees, our best quarterback. He wasn't a draft pick of the Saints. He was a free agent. And remember, he was only in the league 5 years. Nobody wanted him. We signed a guy in free agency that no other team wanted. And he ended up being our greatest quarterback of all time. Well, the injury situation made it unique, but it has to be mentioned. When we got Drew Brees, nobody else wanted him. And he ended up the best player in Saints history. So it's not like the guy that has the spotlight on him is the guy that's going to come in and save your franchise. Drew Brees was drafted by the San Diego Chargers in the 2nd round. And that was, I think, the first at that time. We only had 31 teams, I think. So 1997, I want to say. 98, 99. Drew Brees. Drew Brees. Joey Cook. Joey Cook. That's an inside joke. So yeah, the 32nd player overall taken, Drew Brees, 2nd round. Not even close to a top 10 pick. The greatest running back in Saints history, Alvin Kamara, was taken in the 3rd round, pick 67 overall. The greatest fullback in Saints history has to be Lorenzo Neal. Not sure if he's in the Hall of Fame, but he should be. He was a round 4 pick 89 overall. The greatest wide receiver in Saints history. Well, Marcus Colston has the franchise stats, but a lot of people figure if Michael Thomas wouldn't have gotten injured, he was on pace for a Hall of Fame career. So I'm going to mention both of them here. Marquez Costin, of course, being a seventh round pick 251 overall, almost Mr. Irrelevant. And Michael Thomas, round two, pick 47, nowhere close to the top 10. The greatest tight end in Saints history, Jimmy Graham. I don't think that's really up for debate. He was a third round pick 95. The aforementioned offensive tackle, Willie Roaf, greatest tackle the Saints have ever had. He was a top 10 pick, and he is a Hall of Famer. The best guard in Saints history, probably Jari Evans. He was a round four pick 108 overall. And the greatest center in Saints history, that's up for debate, but right now, Eric McCoy is pretty close to the top of the list. Uh, who else are you going to pick at that spot? I mean, the free agent or the guy we got from Seattle, or, one of our early draft picks, Joel Hilgenberg, maybe. He was a round four pick. And I've got Eric McCoy listed here. Round two pick 43 overall, came in as a guard from college, and we moved him to center. And I think he's the best center we've ever had. And if we keep winning games once he comes back, then yeah, that'll be more proof. On the defensive side of the ball, the best defensive end the Saints ever had is probably Cameron Jordan. He was a first round pick, but he was selected with the 24th overall pick. Nowhere near the top 10. Greatest defensive tackle in Saints history, gotta be Leroy Glover. We got him as a free agent. Nobody else wanted him. He was drafted by the Raiders in the fifth round, pick 166 overall, ended up on their practice squad. Then he ends up on, I think, a Canadian team on their practice squad, perhaps. Not even really playing. The Saints get him, and he ends up on the all-decade team of the 2000s. So, fifth round pick, Leroy Glover. Greatest linebacker in Saints history? Well, shoot, you got about four of them to choose from when you look at the Dome Patrol. Ricky Jackson is on this list. He is a Hall of Famer, and he was a very late second round pick 51 overall. I think back then there was only 56 picks in the first two rounds, so 51 is where Jackson went. Nowhere near the top 10. And if you don't think Jackson is the greatest linebacker in Saints history, well, you can look at Sam Mills. He was undrafted. We got him as a free agent after his stint in the USFL. You can look at Vaughn Johnson, who was a supplementary first round pick by the Jacksonville Bulls of the USFL, I believe. And we got him as a free agent, so he wasn't a draft pick in the NFL. Pat Swilling, great player, one of the greatest linebackers in Saints history, a third round pick 60 overall. And then we'll talk about Demario Davis. We got him as a free agent, one of the greatest free agent signings the Saints have ever had. Certainly one of the best linebackers the Saints have ever had. He was drafted by the Jets in the third round, pick 77 overall. So that's a large list of linebackers for you to gleam on, and none of them a first round pick. All of them great. And Ricky Jackson and Sam Mills, Hall of Famers. All right, Marshawn Lattimore, greatest cornerback Saints history, bar none. Not even gonna look at Dave Waymer or Eric Allen or any of those guys. No, 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 no. Marshawn Lattimore, he was a first round pick, and he just missed the top 10. He was taken at pick 11. And so, there's that. You add that to the facts. And in greatest safety in Saints history, you guys can fight about it all you want. I'm going with Sammy Knight. I think Sammy Knight was a stud. I know he was a stud. And he went undrafted. Nobody wanted that guy. He was a tweener, linebacker safety type, and nobody wanted him. Nobody drafted him. And I think he was our best safety in Saints history. At kicker, Morton Anderson has to be the greatest kicker in Saints history. Hall of Famer, the first Saint to get into the Hall of Fame. He led the NFL with most points scored forever. And I don't think he still has the record, but he's in the top five for sure. He was a fourth round pick, pick 86. You don't expect kickers or punters to be drafted very high. Of course, we drafted Russell Erxleben in the top five in the 70s, but greatest punter in Saints history is probably Thomas Morstead. He was a fifth round pick, pick 164 overall. So those are the greatest players in Saints history, and there's only a couple of them that are even first round picks. Willie Roaf, Cameron Jordan, Marshawn Lattimore. So there's that. So I guess the point to my video is to learn a little history about the Saints and drafting in the top 10 and realizing that we only had 9 picks in the top 10 over the last 43 years. Since the Saints were relative to me in my lifetime, 1981, when I started watching them play at 10 years old. Um, Man, we messed up a bunch of picks in the 70s when we had the opportunity to pick in the top 10, top 5 even. But yeah, not a lot of opportunities for the Saints to do that. So maybe that is a bit of, what's driving the Saints fans nowadays to want the Saints to have that because we never have that. And usually when you have that, you have a chance to grab a player that's going to redefine the franchise. And you can, when you look at that list of the only players we've drafted in the top 10 in the last 43 years, George Rogers was a franchise defining player. Jim Dombrowski was a staple at guard for us. Willie Roaf, definitely a staple. Ricky Williams could have been. And Reggie Bush was a very big contributor to our success in the early days with Sean Payton and Drew Brees. Won a Super Bowl with Reggie on the roster, though he wasn't our number one back then. It was Pierre Thomas. Mike Bell had more yards than all of them when it was said and done that Super Bowl year. So Reggie Bush was, you know, he was an X factor, is the way I like to look at it. But yeah, you can get a player that's can redefine your franchise, and but you can also get great players all over the draft. So now's when I inject my opinion on the matter. I never want to watch the Saints lose. I want the Saints to win every damn game. And being as old as I am and going through this history, when back then when the Saints were 7-9, 8-8, we were so dang close to being winners, and that's all I wanted. I just wanted one 9-7 record for once. That's all I ever wanted. And now after the Drew Brees era, we're all expecting to win 11, 12, 13 games a year, right? If that's what we're used to, that's the standard we should set for this franchise, and we're not anywhere near that. Now, I'm not hoping to just have a winning record nowadays. I'm hoping that we have a record good enough to win our division and get in the playoffs, or at least to get in the playoffs. This year is a mess. We start 2-0, and when healthy, and everyone seemed bought in at the time, we can beat anybody. Yeah, we trounced the Panthers and the Cowboys, and that doesn't say much, but when you play that good, I'm pretty sure you can stay competitive. Then the injury bug hits us, and a lot of players started to lose faith. And I think it was faith in the direction of the team. No, I don't think any of the players really liked Dennis Allen ever since what happened last year in the last game of the year when Allen threw the whole team under the bus and then Mickey Loomis came along and said, yeah, listen to what Dennis Allen has to say. There's probably a lot of spite towards Derek Carr from some of these players too because of the way Dennis Allen and Derek Carr married. And that's something Derek Carr is going to have to fix if he wants to stay on this team now that Dennis Allen is gone. People are like, Dennis Allen, you forgot your shadow. Come back and get him. That's how we feel about Derek Carr. Take him with you. when you go to Denver or wherever. But Derek Carr's our quarterback right now. I don't think there's a quarterback in this year's draft that's worth taking in the first round. There's probably some good ones. You can probably develop a couple of them, and I think if you spend a first round pick on one of them, it's kind of a crapshoot. Saints don't have a lot of success with early rounds players, so recently, especially, and that's a whole other discussion. Mickey Loomis being the GM, Jeff Ireland having a lot of say in players that we fancy, and you hope that the head coach has some say in it. Maybe now that Darren Rizzi's our interim and we see this bump in energy and everything else, let's say we peel off a bunch of wins. We end up with the 15th or 16th overall pick, and maybe Rizzi coaches himself into a head coaching job for the Saints. All of those things are very feasible, I think. The schedule's soft. The Saints are getting healthier. The wide receiving room is a mess, and that's going to be the downfall. That plus, you got it real thin at cornerback all of a sudden. But the schedule's soft, okay? When we look at the Raiders on the schedule, it's like everybody else looking at the Saints and saying, hey, there's a game we can win. I don't think the Washington Commanders are world beaters. So I don't think we're out of that one. It all depends on health as to what's going to happen against the Rams. But there's a legitimate chance the Saints beat Cleveland, that we beat Tampa Bay at the end of the year, that we beat the Giants, even though it's on the road, because the Giants aren't very good. And, we can beat the Raiders. So yeah, if we end up 7-10, we're not going to have a top five pick. We'll be lucky to have a top 10 pick if we finish 7-10, but I think we're going to finish 7-10. And if this team is good enough, if there are players on this team good enough that win healthy, we can compete. And we go on some wild winning streak, I'm not going to begrudge the team for that. I'm a Saints fan. I want them to win. It'll prove to me that Dennis Allen was holding us back the whole time. It'll prove to me Darren Rizzi is a decent coach and that we can win games with these players. It'll ease my feelings on how bad Mickey Loomis and Jeff Ireland and Dennis Allen have drafted over the last couple of years if some of these young players actually do something. I mean, if this team starts winning, how can we be mad as Saints fans? Well, you want that top five pick, you want that top 10 pick. And if there's a player up there that you really want, then it is going to suck that they don't have a top 10 pick. But I look at the top 10 and there's two players that I really want in that top 10. Travis Hunter at cornerback and an X factor at wide receiver, and Ashton Jeanty, the running back from Boise State. And Jeanty may go in the top five. He may be a top five, top 10 pick. He may last till the end of the first round if everyone views running back the way they have lately. No one takes a running back in the first round anymore like they used to back in the day when we drafted three of them in the top five. So, yeah, those are the two players I really want out of that top 10. And then after that, I really want other players that aren't top 10 picks. I really want Tyler Warren at tight end on this team. I see Tyler Warren as the replacement to Taysom Hill, that he can run the ball from the backfield, he can inline block, he can split out wide as a wide receiver. I want that guy on my team. He is not a top five pick. He's not going to be a top 10 pick, but I want him on this team, and I think he could be a difference maker. So that's how I feel about it. I'm not going to wish failure on my favorite team, regardless of how desperate I feel about it right now, because I want to enjoy the moment. And it's way better to win. Everything feels better when you win, and especially if you're you're moving towards something. So we want to change the fortunes of this franchise. And right now, for the rest of this poor season, we want to see which of these players on this current roster are good enough to keep. And that's something to look forward to. Regardless of whether you win or lose, you're still going to determine which one of these are worth keeping. And if they're playing at a level where they're winning, then how can I be mad about that? I think getting rid of Dennis Allen was the number one thing that had to happen. And I think it may change everything. It may turn our entire season around. If we win the next 4 games and all of a sudden we're 7-7, we might be relevant again in the conversation in this NFC South. We might be relevant again in the playoff picture. Playoffs? Yeah, the playoffs. I don't expect it to happen. I expect to enjoy the wins when they come. And with every win, I'm going to congratulate Darren Rizzi on a great job and the players that made it happen. I'm going to congratulate them. I'm going to be happy that they're on my team, and I'm going to feel good about this team winning. I'm not going to worry so much about losing the potential of a top 5 or top 10 pick. I just can't. There's been too many great players throughout the history of this franchise, and you saw that list of the top 5, top 10 picks. Yeah, these other guys weren't there. Frank Warren at defensive end was a third round pick. Hobie Brenner at tight end, a third round pick. I'm going to mention the best players in Saints history right now in this sad ass franchise's history. And almost all of them are not first round picks, much less top 10 picks. Jim Wilkes, defensive tackle. He was drafted in round 12. Defensive end, Jumpy Gathers, second round pick. Center, Joel Hilgenberg, like I said before, fourth round pick. Brian Hansen, the great punter before, back in the 80s, he had a hang time like few of them back then. Yeah, he was a ninth round pick. Eric Martin, one of the greatest wide receivers in Saints history, drafted in the seventh round. Running back Dalton Hilliard was a second round pick. Running back Reuben Mays was a third round pick. Safety Gene Atkins, seventh round pick. Wayne Martin, the defensive end, man. Oh, he was so good. He was a first round pick 19 overall. Joe Johnson, remember him? Joe Johnson was a very good defensive end for the Saints. He was a first round pick and he was taken with pick 13. Darren Howard was a good defensive end. We got him in the top of the second round. Quarterback Mark Bulger, probably the best quarterback we've drafted over the last 30 years. We haven't drafted very good at quarterback. Mark Bulger was a hot flash for a minute when he got to the Rams. He was a fifth round pick for the Saints. Defensive end Will Smith played a lot of years for the Saints, was on the Super Bowl team. He was a first round pick, but he was taken with pick 18. Wide receiver Devery Henderson out of LSU, a big staple at wide receiver. We all knew he wasn't the greatest wide receiver in the world, but boy, he played a part on those great offenses with Drew Brees. He was a second round pick. Safety Roman Harper, a second round pick. Tackle Zach Strief, a seventh round pick. Cornerback Tracy Porter, who had the game sealing interception in the Super Bowl. Tracy Porter was a second round pick. Guard Carl Nicks was a fifth round pick. Safety Malcolm Jenkins was the 14th overall pick in the first round. Wow. Let's see. Mark Ingram, first round pick, but 28th overall. Teron Armstead at offensive tackle, third round pick. Von Bell at safety, second round pick. David Onyemata, who's still playing with the Falcons now, he was a fourth round pick. Ryan Ramczyk was the last pick in the first round. And now we're getting to recent history with, Kamara. Marcus Williams was a second rounder. Trey Hendrickson was a third rounder. CJ Gardner Johnson was a fourth rounder. And currently on the team right now, Paulson Adebo, one of the best players, but he's out for the year. He was a third round pick. And our great linebacker, Pete Werner, a second round pick. So Huge list right there of the best players in Saints history, actually. And yeah, not a lot of them in the first round, almost none of them in the top five, top 10. Um, Willie Roaf is that shining example of getting a top 10 pick who turns into a Hall of Famer. And the other Hall of Famers for the Saints, there they are. Drew Brees, a second round pick by the Chargers, and a free agent no one wanted for the Saints. And then you've got kicker Morton Anderson, fourth round pick. I mean, nobody picks kickers high, but hey, it's a small list of Hall of Famers for the Saints. Yeah, there's only five of them. Ricky Jackson was the next one to go in. He was a second round pick. Willie Roaf got in. He was that eighth overall first rounder. And then Sam Mills, who was undrafted. And yeah, there's a statue of him in front of the Panthers Stadium, and he only played for them for 3 years. Made an impact, not even drafted. So there's my video, guys. I thought it was interesting. I wanted to take a walk down memory lane. Let's examine all the players we've gotten in the top five, top 10. And you know, the old saying, and everyone's going to say it, even if the Saints had a great draft pick, they probably wouldn't make a good pick anyway. The draft is all about picking the right player, and you saw through the lists I've shown you and the things I've said, you know, you can get great players in every single round. Let's just hope our front office and whoever's the new head coach can figure this out. And as far as the current Saints, I'm all about a guy like Darren Rizzi being our head coach. People get enamored about the head coach thinking he's got to be some sort of brilliant offensive mind or defensive mind, when actually, if he can just hire the right people to coordinate the offense and the defense, then what a great head coach needs to have is instincts and good fundamentals on game day management and organizing schedules and practices and holding players and coaches accountable. That's what a really good head coach does. You know, I don't know how brilliant of a offensive mind Andy Reid is. I know he's got some good coordinators under him, but he seems to manage all that other head coaching stuff pretty good. And the best example I like to use when talking about Darren Rizzi is Dan Campbell. Is Dan Campbell a brilliant offensive mind? No. People are saying his coordinator is. Is he a brilliant defensive mind? No. They're saying his defensive coordinator is. They've drafted really well, and this head coach holds players and coaches accountable. He seems like the kind of guy that Darren Rizzi would be a head coach. That's all I'm saying. I'm giving Riz that much props, where I don't know how good of a head coach he'll be, but as far as organization, holding people accountable, being a leader of men, being vocal, and also letting your coaches do what they do. You know, Rizzi's got all that. And will he make the right choices? You know, if Clint Kubiak still fails in the second half of every game, will Rizzi fire Clint Kubiak and go get us a better offensive coordinator? It's possible. If this defense starts to suck it up and we decide to get away from this Dennis Allen defense, then will Rizzi fire Joe Woods? I think this game against Cleveland coming up is going to be a big tell because Joe Woods coached with Cleveland for a while. So I think Cleveland's going to have a bead on what Joe Woods likes to do, as well as what Dennis Allen's defense does over the years. So lots to still learn about the Saints in the upcoming games, but I'm not going to begrudge a victory, especially in the hopes of getting a top five or top 10 pick that might end up being a bust, or in that very rare instance could be a Hall of Famer. Well, there's your brief history on the Saints and how it's gone so far. I'm Joe. Subscribe to Rosenfield 10 for more videos about our beloved, bless you boys, in black and gold, the New Orleans Saints. And until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Who dat?